The island of Crete, bathed by the vast, shimmering waters of the Aegean Sea, wasn't just fertile land. It was a powerful hub of civilization in antiquity. There reigned Minos, a king whose lineage stretched directly to Mount Olympus, for he was a son of Zeus himself, the sovereign of the gods, and the alluring Phoenician princess Europa. Minos ascended to the throne of Crete after the death of his stepfather, King Asterius, but his authority wasn't universally accepted. His brothers Sarpedon and Rhadamanthus questioned his legitimacy, forcing Minos to seek divine confirmation for his reign. In an act of faith and challenge, Minos made a solemn oath to Poseidon, the imposing god of the seas and earthquakes. He pleaded with the god to send him a magnificent bull, a creature of unmatched beauty and power, as a visible sign that the heavens and oceans approved his sovereignty. In return, Minos promised to sacrifice this divine bull in Poseidon's honor, solidifying his pact with the deity. And Poseidon answered. From the frothing depths of the Aegean, a bull of colossal proportions emerged, with fur as white as freshly fallen snow and imposing horns that gleamed under the Cretan sun. It was an animal of such perfection and majesty that it took one's breath away. However, the sight of this divine creature ignited in Minos an overwhelming greed and immeasurable pride. He couldn't bring himself to sacrifice something so beautiful and powerful. In a fatal act of disobedience, Minos deceived Poseidon, substituting the divine bull with a common bull for the sacrifice, keeping the splendid animal for himself. This betrayal, however, did not go unpunished. The gods are not easily fooled, and Poseidon's wrath was terrible, falling upon Minos' household in a cruel and insidious way. The curse struck Pasiphae, the queen of Crete and Minos' wife, a woman of divine blood, daughter of Helios, the sun god. Poseidon afflicted her with an overwhelming and utterly unnatural passion for the white bull, an uncontrollable lust that consumed her. Desperate to consummate this aberrant desire, Pasiphae sought the help of the most brilliant and ingenious craftsman of his time, Daedalus, an exiled Athenian who lived at Minos' court. Daedalus, an unmatched inventor with a mind capable of conceiving the impossible, constructed a hollow wooden cow, so realistically sculpted and covered with cowhide that the divine bull itself was fooled. Pasiphae hid inside the structure, and thus her forbidden passion was consummated. From this monstrous union, a horrific creature was born that would become the ultimate shame and terror for Minos. With the muscular body of a man and the head and tail of a bull, the creature was an aberration of nature, a living personification of Minos' disobedience and insolence toward the gods. Its original name, Asterius, in honor of Minos' stepfather, was soon overshadowed by the epithet that would echo through the centuries: Minos' bull. Wild, and with an insatiable craving for human flesh, the Minotaur grew rapidly, becoming a constant threat to the court and the people of Crete. Ashamed by the creature's existence and terrified of its appetite, but unable to kill it since it was the offspring of his wife and Poseidon's bull, needed to confine it in a way that it could never escape. Again, he turned to Daedalus, demanding that the genius build a structure that would not only contain the monster but be so complex that no one, not even Daedalus himself, could easily find their way out. Daedalus, the reclusive genius, immersed himself in his task, not without feeling the weight of the tragedy his previous invention had unleashed. He conceived a structure that wasn't just a prison but a masterpiece of disorientation and despair, built beneath the grand palace of Gnosis, which Daedalus had also helped design and embellish with his inventions and advanced hydraulic systems. The labyrinth was an intricate network of winding corridors, sinuous passages leading to dead ends, sudden turns, and subtle traps. Its complexity was so immense that, once inside, the chance of finding the exit was virtually nil. Not even the Minotaur, with its brute strength, could escape. Within these cold stone walls, the monster was confined, its guttural roar echoing through the corridors, amplifying the terror it inspired. While the Minotaur remained hidden, the Cretan, Minos' dominance over the seas, reached its peak. The king of Crete had become the greatest naval power in the Aegean, and his greed for power and control manifested not only in his wealth, but in his hegemony over other cities. It was in this context of overwhelming power that Androgeus, Minos' son, an athletic and talented young man, was killed in Athens during the Panathenaic Games, or, in some versions, out of envy for his athletic excellence, or even in an ambush set by Athenian rivals. Tragedy struck Athens. He declared war on Athens and, with his powerful fleet and army, subdued the city. Crete's victory was followed by a cruel and humiliating tribute. Every 9 years, or, in some legends annually, Athens had to send 7 young men and 7 young women. These 14 youths, the flower of their generation, were destined for a single purpose: to be cast into the labyrinth, where they would be devoured by the Minotaur. This tribute was a terrible burden for Athens, an open wound in the city's soul. With each cycle, despair and sorrow gripped families as they bid farewell to their children, knowing they were being sent to a brutal and certain death in the monster's belly. The streets of Athens filled with laments, and the shadow of Crete constantly hung over the city. The sacrifice was not merely an act of cruelty by Minos, but a constant reminder of his domination and Athenian helplessness. Legends tell that the very air of Athens grew heavy with the anguish of parents who watched their children embark towards such a horrifying fate. Athens, prostrate under the terror of the Cretan tribute, cried out for a savior, and he emerged in the figure of Theseus, a young prince of athletic build and indomitable courage, son of King Minos of Athens. Theseus was already renowned for his heroic deeds, having purged the path to Athens of bandits and monsters, like the brigand Procrustes and the Marathonian bull, demonstrating not only strength but also intelligence and an unwavering sense of justice. Seeing his people's pain and the humiliation imposed by Minos, Theseus didn't hesitate. He volunteered to be one of the 14 sacrificial youths, determined to end the barbarity and slay the Minotaur no matter the cost. When the young Athenians arrived in Crete, Theseus's aura and singular beauty captivated Ariadne, one of Menesis and Pasiphae's daughters, and thus, Ariadne, a sensitive young woman, fell instantly in love with the Athenian hero. Despite her loyalty to her father, compassion and love for Theseus overcame everything. She knew the cruelty of the labyrinth and the impossibility of escaping its hellish corridors. In secret, Ariadne sought out Daedalus, the brilliant builder of the labyrinth, who had been responsible for its very existence and the creature's imprisonment. Daedalus, perhaps regretting having created such an instrument of misery, or moved by his cunning, revealed the secret of the exit to Ariadne, a ball of thread. Ariadne then met with Theseus, handing him not only the ball of thread, but also a magical sword in some versions, a dagger or his own, Father King Aegeus's sword, which he had hidden under a rock, before leaving for Athens, and gave him crucial instructions to tie one end of the thread at the labyrinth's entrance and unwind it as he ventured through the corridors. This way, after the battle, he could follow the thread back and find his way to freedom. Theseus, armed with the sword and Ariadne's precious thread, entered the labyrinth with the other youths. The oppressive silence of the stone passages and the growing darkness were punctuated only by the echoes of their hesitant footsteps. As they delved deeper into the prison's heart, the air grew heavier, and the terrifying guttural roar of the Minotaur began to be heard, growing closer, filling the young Athenians' hearts with dread. Finally, Theseus confronted the creature in its deepest lair. The battle was a spectacle of ferocity and courage. The Minotaur was a powerful, savage beast, with the strength of a bull and the cunning of a man, attacking with its sharp horns and muscular mass. Theseus, with his agility, strength, and the blade of his sword, or, in some legends, using only his bare hands and brute force, fought valiantly. It was an exhausting and bloody combat, a deadly dance in the labyrinth's darkness. Finally, after dodging one last savage attack, Theseus struck the fatal blow, plunging the sword into the monster's neck, or, in other versions, breaking its neck, silencing the Minotaur's roar forever. With the beast slain, the labyrinth's terror dissipated. Theseus and the Athenian youths, now free from the threat, followed Ariadne's thread, finding their way back out of the labyrinth, and emerging victorious into the light of day, carrying with them the hope and liberation of Athens. Theseus' promise had been fulfilled. Theseus' victory, the Minotaur's death, and the escape of the Athenian youths, along with the betrayal by his own daughter Ariadne, were a devastating blow to King Minos' prestige and power. His hegemony over Athens was shattered, and the monstrous symbol of his disobedience to Poseidon had been annihilated. Consumed by blind fury and profound humiliation, Minos immediately suspected Daedalus' involvement, the only one capable of unraveling the secrets of his complex prison. In his rage, Minos imprisoned Daedalus and his son, Icarus, within the labyrinth itself, or in a high tower in the palace of Minotaur. The goal was to ensure that the genius could no longer aid enemies, and that the secrets of his invention remained hidden. However, Daedalus, with his ever-innovative mind, would not be contained by stone walls. He observed the birds, studying the mechanics of their flight, and conceived a daring escape plan. With patience and ingenuity, he constructed 2 sets of wings, one for himself and one for Icarus, using bird feathers tied together with linen and secured with wax. Before embarking on their flight, Daedalus, with a heavy heart, warned Icarus, "Don't fly too high, my son," he said, "lest the sun's scorching heat melt the wax that binds our wings. And don't fly too low, lest the sea's moisture weigh down the feathers and make them heavy." The instruction was clear: maintain a middle, safe path. However, Icarus, young and inexperienced, intoxicated by the freedom and euphoria of flight, disobeyed. He soared higher and higher, enchanted by the sun's proximity, ignoring his father's desperate cries. The intense heat of the sun melted the wax from his wings. Icarus plunged from the sky, falling into the sea, which has since been known as the Icarian Sea in his memory. Daedalus, desolate and heartbroken by his son's tragedy, continued his solitary journey, eventually finding refuge in Sicily, at the court of King Minos. But Minos' greed for revenge and obsession with control didn't cease. He couldn't allow Daedalus, the man who knew the secrets of his labyrinth and had helped his enemies to remain free. Minos then traveled through various cities and kingdoms of the Mediterranean, carrying with him a peculiar riddle, a seashell with a spiral hole, offering a great reward to anyone who could pass a thread through all the intricate turns of the shell. Minos knew that only Daedalus, with his unique intelligence for mechanical and architectural problems, would be able to solve such an enigma. Upon arriving at the court of King Cocalus in Sicily, Minos presented his challenge. Cocalus, aware that Daedalus was under his protection, didn't immediately hand him over but brought the seashell to Daedalus. Unable to resist the intellectual challenge and perhaps unwisely confident, solved the riddle. He tied a thin silk thread to an ant's leg and released it into the shell soaping. The small creature, following the natural spirals, emerged from the other side with the thread, solving the mystery. Upon seeing the threaded seashell, Minos immediately knew Daedalus was there and demanded his surrender to King Cocalus. However, Cocalus's daughters, who had grown fond of Daedalus and admired his inventions, decided to intervene to protect him. While Minos was taking a bath, they conspired in a cunning and fatal way, poured boiling water over him or drowned him, putting an end to his life in his relentless pursuit. Thus the powerful King Minos, whose greed and pride led him to disrespect the gods, imposed a cruel tribute and relentlessly pursue those who defied him, met his end, far from his island, a victim of his own obsession and the very intelligence he valued, which ultimately sealed his fate. Minos' fall, marked by this ignoble death, symbolized the end of an era of Cretan power and hegemony, although his legacy as a legislator and king was still recognized in the realms of the dead, where he became one of the 3 judges of the deceased. Alongside Rhadamanthus and Iacchus, his story remains a timeless cautionary tale. It illustrates how disobedience to oaths, arrogance in the face of divine power, and the greed for absolute control can lead to ruin, even for a king of divine origin, and how the consequences of our actions, especially those driven by hubris, can manifest in monstrous and unexpected ways. Echoing for generations, the saga of King Minos, the Labyrinth, and the Minotaur is one of the richest and most dramatic in Greek mythology, filled with ambition, betrayal, heroism, and the consequences of pride. What part of this story surprised you most, or made you reflect on Minos' choices and greed? Do you believe Minos' disobedience and his relentless pursuit of control were his true downfall? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if there's another mythological figure or historical mystery you'd love us to explore in our next video, leave your suggestion below. Your curiosity is our guide.